You Union veterans of Maryland have prepared your feast and offered to me, a rebel veteran of Missouri, the wound-healing bread and salt of a gracious hospitality. Do you realize all the vast significance of the situation? Do you sense the whole magnitude of this conjunction, and perceive with what opulence of blessing for this nation it is freighted? What is it we are doing? Reflect. Upon this stage tonight we play the closing scene of the mightiest drama of modern times, and ring down for good and all the curtain raised at Sumter 26 years ago. The two grand divisions of the nation, which we name in general terms the North and the South, have shaken hands long ago and given and taken the kiss of peace. Was anything lacking to make the reconciliation perfect? The fusion of feeling complete? Yes. The great border states attached to those grand divisions, but belonging to neither of them, and independent of both, were silent, had made no forgiving sign to each other across the chasm left by the convulsion of war, and the world grieved that this was so. But tonight, the Union veteran of Maryland clasps hands with the rebel veteran of Missouri, and the gap is closed. In this supreme moment, the imperfect welding of the broken union is perfected at last, and from this hour the seam of the joining shall no more be visible. The long tragedy is ended. Bring down the curtain. When your secretary invited me to this reunion of the Union veterans of Maryland, he requested me to come prepared to clear up a matter which he said had long been a subject of dispute and bad blood in war circles in this country, to wit, the true dimensions of my military services in the Civil War, and the effect which they had upon the general result. I recognize the importance of this thing to history, and I have come prepared. Here are the details. I was in the Civil War 2 weeks. In that brief time, I rose from private to second lieutenant. The monumental feature of my campaign was the one battle which my command fought. It was in the summer of '61. If I do say it, it was the bloodiest battle ever fought in human history. There is nothing approaching it for destruction of human life in the field, if you take in consideration the forces engaged and the proportion of death to survival. And yet you do not even know the name of that battle. Neither do I. It had a name, but I have forgotten it. It is no use to keep private information which you can't show off. Now look at the way history does. It takes the Battle of Boonville, fought nearby about the date of our slaughter, and shouts its teeth loose over it, and yet never even mentions ours. Doesn't even call it an affair. Doesn't call it anything at all. Never even heard of it. Whereas, what are the facts? Why, these. In the Battle of Boonville, there were 2,000 men engaged on the Union side and about as many on the other, supposed to be. The casualties, all told, were 2 men killed, and not all of these were killed outright, but only half of them, for the other man died in hospital next day. I know that because his great-uncle was second cousin to my grandfather, who spoke 3 languages and was perfectly honorable and upright, though he had warts all over him and used to, but never mind about that. The facts are just as I say, and I can prove it. 2 men killed in that Battle of Boonville, and that's the whole result. All the others got away on both sides. Now then, in our battle, there were just 15 men engaged on our side, all brigadier generals but me, and I was a second lieutenant. On the other side, there was 1 man. He was a stranger. We killed him. It was night, and we thought he was an army of observation. He looked like an army of observation. In fact, he looked bigger than an army of observation would in the daytime. And some of us believed he was trying to surround us, and some thought he was going to try to turn our position, and so we shot him. Poor fellow, he probably wasn't an army of observation after all. But that wasn't our fault. As I say, he had all the look of it in that dim light. It was a sorrowful circumstance, but he took the chances of war, and he drew the wrong card. He overestimated his fighting strength, and he suffered the likely result. But he fell as the brave should fall, with his face to the foe and feet to the field. So we buried him with the honors of war and took his things. So began and ended the only battle in the history of the world where the opposing force was utterly exterminated, swept from the face of the earth to the last man. And yet you don't know the name of that battle. You don't even know the name of that man. Now then, for the argument. Suppose I had continued in the war and gone on as I began and exterminated the opposing force every 2 weeks. Where would your war have been? Why, you see yourself, the conflict would have been too one-sided. There was but one honorable course for me to pursue, and I pursued it. I withdrew to private life and gave the Union cause a chance. There now, you have the whole thing in a nutshell. It was not my presence in the Civil War that determined that tremendous contest. It was my retirement from it that brought the crash. It left the Confederate side too weak. And yet, when I stop and think, I cannot regret my course, no. When I look abroad over this happy land, with its wounds healed and its enmities forgotten, this reunited sisterhood of majestic states, this freest of free commonwealths the sun in his course shines upon, this one sole country nameable in history or tradition, where a man is a man and manhood the only royalty, this people, ruled by the justest and wholesomest laws in government yet devised by the wisdom of men. This mightiest of the civilized empires of the earth in numbers, in prosperity, in progress, and in promise. And reflect that there is no north, no south any more, but that as in the old times it is now and will remain forever in the hearts and speech of Americans, our land, our country, our giant empire, and the flag floating in its firmament, our flag. I would not wish it otherwise. No, when I look about me and contemplate these sublime results, I feel deep down in my heart that I acted for the best when I took my shoulder out from under the Confederacy and let it come down.